Hi everybody, welcome to this video where we're going to be answering a question that a viewer had about developing timelines as it relates to fieldwork. So I'm going to read you the question just as it is, and it goes like this. How do you develop a timeline for fieldwork? More specifically, how can I break down in writing how long it'll take to carry out in-person interviews for original data collection? Also, IRB timelines vary so widely. How do we figure this into the fieldwork timeline? So I'm going to do with this the best that I can because I am missing some specifics here that might help me kind of give a little bit better of an answer, but I think I can give a really good general answer here because it is really important when you're doing your research to have a timeline, right? And at least sometimes you'll run into problems and, the timeline will kind of wibble wobble a little bit, but you at least need to start with a good framework in place that you can make adjustments to as things come up that are, out of your control, because that's just research. So let's start with this part about IRB. So IRB timelines vary widely. All right, so going into this, right, you have your research question, you have your design, all of that stuff. You know what you're doing. So with IRB, if you've never written, and here's the thing, let me back up for a minute. I changed institutions about 4.5 years ago. And, with my first institution, I understood their IRB process. I understood how it worked. I understood what the turnaround was. When I got to the new institution, even though I had 12 years of experience with IRB at my previous institution, I had to learn, right, what this institution's process was. Yes, a lot of it's similar in terms of the types of things you have to submit, but how fast were they going to be? I don't know. How do I submit? What are the reviewers like? What are things that are important to them? How's it going to be different or the same, right? So I kind of had that, I had to relearn a few things in terms of how the institution does it. So, with the IRB timeline, first you have to write it. And the first time that you write an IRB, it can take you a lot of time. And I will say this because, look, I don't like writing IRBs. I get why they're necessary. I totally agree with it. But it gets a little dull when you write it. And it requires a particular mindset in terms of how you write it and the language that you use. We should probably do a whole series on IRBs in the future because it's really important. And it's a different way about thinking about things. So if you've never written an IRB before, then you're going to want to get some feedback. You want to get somebody to take a look at that IRB, somebody that has research experience before you submit it, right? Because they're probably going to find all kinds of holes and gaps in what you wrote because you probably didn't realize the level of detail that you had to provide IRB with, okay? So it can take you a little while to write. It can take you a little while to write because A, they're boring. I can only do it for maybe an hour at a time and then I can't do it anymore. So I sort of plan that when I'm doing my IRB, right? I plan for okay, I can only work on an hour a day and then I lose my mind. And then if you're new, you should plan for having to do some revisions before you even submit it because you're new and it is a different way of writing and thinking. And then ask, right? You can just ask anybody how long this got experience there. How long does it typically take? Okay. And ask that up front and get that information and ask for information on what to expect. And that is how you get that information, right, to help you deal with it. I find that typically within a month, I have feedback. I think my previous institution was a lot quicker, like a couple weeks. So I think a month is kind of on the long end. But on the other hand, right, I just had to make some IRB revisions and I submitted it. And I think the next day that it was cleared, it was good to go. Okay. So that's the other thing too, to know about IRB is that, with those IRB timelines, when you get after you submit it, you're most likely going to have to make revisions, okay? So as a new person, you might be thinking, didn't you just tell me to get feedback to make revisions before I submitted it? Yes, I did, to cut down on the level of revisions that IRB is probably going to tell you. I almost always get revisions that I have to make. They typically take me no more than 30 minutes. Usually it's just some minor mistakes that I've made, things that I left in a consent form that don't need to be in the consent form because they give you a template. that need to be deleted, or, oh, you forgot to, you know, put this information in this spot over here, please put it there. And it takes like a minute to do that. So I still make mistakes and leave little things out. That's why you've got a review process for it. So that's what you're going to have to factor in, right? You have to factor in the writing of the IRB. You have to factor in the space, we'll say roughly a month-ish, where somebody's got it and is reviewing it. And then you've got to factor in the fact that you're going to have revisions, and you're going to have time to make those revisions, and then factor in that it's going to go back to IRB again for review. And so how fast is all that going to take? That depends on where you are. Okay. And so again, reach out to somebody and get that information. Now I'm realizing, because I started really with this, the IRB question, portion of this question, because it made the most sense to me to start with. That we've video's kind of gone on a little bit here. So what I'm going to do here is wrap this up. We'll just kind of consider this part one. And then in the next video, I can say words. I really can. In the next video, we will look at how you develop this timeline for your video and get into the rest of this viewer's question.